There are myriad victims of racial discrimination around the world. The prejudices of those who think they are supreme and two with power are the most dangerous combination to wreck a human life, since they consider the marginalized as subhumans. This is the true story of a great man who has been fighting against discrimination and racism for many years. Welcome back to Red Recapped. Today I'm going to tell the story of a biography, drama movie, The Hurricane. Stay tuned. In 1966, Rubin Carter, aka Hurricane, was a very popular boxer, expected by many fans to become the world's greatest boxing champion. Rubin's opponent is Emil Griffith, the welterweight champion. Rubin landed numerous heavy punches over Griffith's head to finalize a knockdown. Crowds go crazy as well as Carter. The movie fasts forwards a while, and we are shown an enraged Carter in jail. The reason behind his worry is an autobiography he has been working on. The book contains numerous details to be the only way to clear him of all allegations.
No! Calm down! Calm down! Yeah!
Back in 1966 in New Jersey, two black men in a white car enter a cafe and shower three white men with bullets, witnessed by two other men. Later that night, police arrest Hurricane along with another man in a white car, as they are perfectly matched with criminals. Later, Carter is shown to one of the victims, severely injured but still alive. Man rejects Hurricane to be the shooter. Just then, an Italian-American detective named Della Pesca appears. He tries his best to make the man commit perjury as he has a lifelong hostility to Carter. Rubin ends up being imprisoned. There, he started working on his autobiography. 7 years after his imprisonment at a second-hand bookstore in Canada, a youngster boy named Lesra picks Hurricane's published book The 16th Round amidst many. The book cover is of a black man like himself. So he is encouraged to buy it at a very cheap 25-cent price. Lesra lives a happy life along with his foster family, three young idealist civil activists named Sam, Lisa, and Terry. Lesra enthusiastically starts reading the book and walk through Carter's childhood. A hard era, Rubin had must adapted to cruelty or he wouldn't survive. As a turning point in his life, one day, a corrupt child abuser high-ranked authority had attempted to harass one of his friends. Rubin landed a bottle right on his head to save his friend. Unfortunately, he got caught. Fearing of being harassed by the child abuser, he stabs the man several times and flees in fear. He was brutally dragged to the police station. It was the first time Rubin met Della Pesca. He is a black boy with a knife who speaks with a stammer.
I didn't do nothing.
At the time, those would be enough to consider him as a criminal. Besides that, he had killed a high-ranking official close to Della Pesca. As a result, the incident was distorted into 11-year-old Rubin had attempted to steal his gold watch, and, due to his resistance, stabbed him to death. Judge is also no less racist than many. So Rubin was considered to be a menace by the unfair racist judge and sentenced to prison until he turns 21. Devastated by Rubin's cruel childhood, Lesra reminisces about a memory from his real family. He lived in poverty along with his family in Brooklyn. Even though he was smart, racial restrictions did not allow him to continue his education. Until Sam, Terry and Lisa showed up to persuade his father to let Lesra move in, believing in his ability and intelligence. In spite of all his love for Lesra, his father agreed to the offer, seeing his enthusiasm for studying. Back to the book, after an agonizing 8 long years, Rubin escapes from prison. Despite all the cruelty, he achieves many goals. From overcoming his stutter through mind control to joining the US military and also being awarded as an All-European Army boxing champion. He has learnt that kindness, knowledge and hard working are the keys to freeing a black man. One day, Rubin meets a girl named May Thelma at a cafe. They instantly fall for each other and decide to marry. Rubin has just got the chance to live a normal life with May Thelma, but unfortunately, Della Pesca along with his men, appears out of nowhere to make him spend his remaining jail time. Back in prison, Rubin finds other inmates pointless to communicate, so he never mixes up with them. Instead, he trains all day long to become the world boxing champion. In 1961, Rubin is released from prison. He makes a pact not to return there for the rest of his life. Prison training has made an iron out of his body, making nobody lasts against him over a single round, and he seems unstoppable. Rubin defeats his opponents one by one to qualify for the World's Championship final match. Impressed by Rubin's ambition and mental power, Lesra asks the trio to get him a punching bag to become someone like Carter. They kindly provide him with the punching bag to start his training. In the final game, Rubin clearly fought better than his opponent. But unexpectedly, he lost the fight, thanks to a racist judge, who left everyone dumbfounded. How strong a person could be to deal with that injustice. Later that night, at a club, he came across a fan. Treating him nice as always, even offered him to drive his car. But to their bad luck, this is when they are arrested, shown at the beginning of the movie. They are taken to the crime scene. Witnesses refuse them to be the attackers. But at the police station, Della Pesca blackmails them as they have violated their parole, offering them to perjury about the hurricane in exchange of their freedom. They do so without thinking much of it. Not long after, gathered white people in a jury verdict Ruben along with other miserable boy, named John, as guilty. Life prison for the duo, announced by the judge. Upon hearing it, you can find a mix of anger, terror, dignity and fatalism in his face. While John burst into crying. Remember, it's a true story, not fiction one. Ruben is sent to prison for the third time. He refuses to wear prison clothing as he has committed no crime, but the warden doesn't care much about it. He orders to send him to the solitary cell for 3 months, 90 days in a subdued hole without showering permission. How does a person survive under such circumstances? He sits in the dark watching two sides of himself battle for control, an angry side and a self-made one.
Feel like I want to kill somebody, except there ain't nobody in here to kill. Shut up! Except you, boy.
3 months later, he visits Mr. Williams, one of several guards who has developed respect for him. Mr. Williams offers him to put prison hospital uniform on. It's white and there's no numbers or stripes on it. Ruben agrees and appreciates his help, then heads for shower to get his appearance back to normal. Ruben learns to separate himself mentally from prison. Instead, he examines his case in meticulous detail from the initial arrest until the verdict of life prison. For 7 years, he had been looking to find a way to prove his innocence. But nothing has worked. In 1976, Ruben was widely subjected to the support of people and many great celebrities, such as Muhammad Ali Clay and Ellen Burstyn. Even Bob Dylan released a song named Hurricane, taken from Ruben's real life in which Bob Dylan believed him as innocent. May Thelma comes to visit Ruben, believing the current atmosphere is great to push the Court of Appeal. On the other hand, Ruben informs her that his last trial has been rejected like the last two of them. Desperate, Ruben asks his beloved wife to file for a divorce, believing she has a long life to live while Ruben never going to be released.
I'm dead. Just bury me, please.
Devastated, she breaks down crying. In the meantime, Lesra asks his family to find a way to make Ruben free, but they refuse, as they find it harder and more time-consuming than to be done. Hearing this, Lesra decides to write a letter to him in which he believes in his innocence, and the fact that his life has been changed since he read Ruben's book. Ruben finds the boy incredibly sincere and kind, so that he replies him instantly, which send Lesra over the moon. In the next letter, Lesra requests him a visit which he kindly agrees to. He then takes a trip from Canada to the United States. When they meet, Ruben confesses him that he's the one who brings hopes in Ruben's life, while the latter thinks the same. Lesra explains how his Canadian family meet him in Brooklyn and helped him getting literate to uplift his life standard and brighten his future. Ruben believes that knowledge is everything and encourage him to keep on studying. Before leaving, Lesra and Ruben take a duo photo. From then on they continue corresponding. After meeting Lesra, Ruben gets his belief back in humanity, causes him to socialize better with people. On the other hand, Lesra manages to convince the trio to pay Ruben a visit. After greeting, they inquire about Ruben's case and more specific about the appeal court process, looking to find a way to release him. But, after several disappointments at justice, Ruben has learned that he would feel much better if he lost all hopes. So he has taken his current life as his fate. But their comments on keep fighting for freedom annoys Ruben, make him leave the table, as they didn't understand the tragedy Ruben got through all these years. A while later, he gets some photos from Canadians, assuming them to be nice people, but Ruben had lost everything in his life because of some white people. It's a voice in the back of his head, reminding him do not trust white people. While the other side browbeat him no more hate. He ends up finding them good-hearted people. They become good friends and the corresponding proceeds, but for not too long. One day, Ruben informs them he had lost the appeal court for the third time. He appreciates their courtesy and asks them to not write or visit, as their love makes Ruben vulnerable. A year passes by with no corresponding or proceeding in the case, until one day, depressed Ruben gets a package from Lesra, a photo of his new girlfriend and, more importantly, his high school diploma, which really belongs to Ruben and his Canadian family. A few days later, Ruben calls them, explaining that he cannot take the prison anymore. He soon gets a call from them, and is surprised to find they have moved from Canada to New Jersey to take him home, one way or the other. They stay in a building that can be seen from prison, explaining to him that they are all together in Ruben's case, not leaving when they all leave. Ruben is greatly impressed by them. No wasting time, the group visits Ruben's attorneys, Bedlock and Friedman, to get more information. The attorneys are nice people who have never got any penny from Ruben. They also remind them that many people, including celebrities and charitable, had been working on this case for 10 years, all ended up failing as the process is too hard, slow and heartbreaking. However, through their insistence, the trio finally gets what they want, Tons of documents, piled up all over the years. They then visit Ruben to get some details about the night he got arrested. It's revealed the crime was committed at 2:45, while Ruben had left the club at 2:30. Ruben reminisces about John Artis, the boy who was imprisoned because of him, who was no less hurt than Ruben and considered to be a hero by him. It turns out a man named Avery Cockersham, who lives across the street, witnessed the murder that night. After that, Cockersham left the town and nobody could find him. Sam, Lisa and Terry spent several months examining each and every piece of evidence. They eventually find Cockersham's place, and head there. Mrs. Cockersham is a nice and kind person. During the conversation, she reveals to them that Reuben Carter is not the killer, according to her husband. Mr. Cockersham had reported that to the police several times, Della Pesca on top of that, but to no avail. It also turns out that Avery was mysteriously killed just before the trial. The killer is assumed to be Della Pesca or his men. Somewhere else in the street, Della Pesca suddenly shows up, threatening Canadian that they would die if they continue investigating Reuben's case and leaving them surprised but not scared, as it makes them more determined than ever. Back in prison, Lisa briefs Reuben about their activities. Reuben in turn informs Lisa about a private detective, Barbieri, who was hired by the prosecutor. Many evidence has been provided by him but not any note exists. Reuben believes he has hidden his notes somewhere to protect himself. Wasting no time, the group finds Barbieri's place. They are surprised to realize that Mr. Barbieri had died right before the trial, just like Mr. Cockersham. His daughter shows them the place he had hidden the notes. They end up finding his diary in which he discovers that a call had been recorded to an emergency operator, Jin Wall, at 2:28 in that night, to report the shooting. It will be a solid proof to change any court verdict only if they will be able to prove it. The current report has been signed by Mrs. Lenore Harkinson, who turns out to be Jin Wall's supervisor, when they visit her. To avoid any trouble, Mrs. Wall refuses any cooperation. Back in prison, Reuben is shocked to recognize Della Pesca's handwriting on the report, realizing that he was the one who had forged the supervisor's signature. Later that night, on the way back home, their car tire suddenly gets flat, causing the car to slide over the road and end up crashing into the concrete. Fortunately, they sustained no injuries. It seems that Della Pesca is going to fulfill his threats to them. In jail, Reuben visits Friedman and Bedlock. Reuben urges them to take new evidence to federal court, as some authorities don't allow occurrence of justice in New Jersey. Bedlock warns that if they present new evidence to the federal court it will more likely be rejected, and by the law, he will not be allowed to request another appeal court so that he remains in prison till he dies. While Friedman agrees with Reuben, he ends up persuading them.
I've been locked up for 30 years.
Later that day, he bids farewell to his friend and other inmates, before heading to federal court. At the beginning of the court, the judge notifies them of the implications of their action, as Bedlock said earlier. Bedlock tells that the chief investigator, Mr. Barbieri, had resigned as he had discovered the truth that the case was built on the foundation of forgeries and lies. Their evidence shows that the guilty one is not Reuben but some corrupt police forces and the prosecutor's office. The judge gives them two options to send the case back to the New Jersey Appeal Court, unless, all the evidence would be lost forever if they're unable to prove it here in federal court. But Reuben wants the trial to proceed. The opposition side claims that Reuben was given 2 jury trials, but both had failed, indicating that he had always been a threat to society. While Bedlock and Friedman declare Reuben had been framed based on racial discrimination by Della Pesca and some corrupt authorities. By judge's permission, Reuben starts defending himself, telling that he has spent 30 years in the House of Justice, and yet there's no justice for him. He also requires the judge to not ignore the law and embrace the higher principle for which the law was meant to serve.
Justice, that's all I ask.
Then the court goes to a recess. The movie then goes to a flashback to a few days ago, where Reuben appreciated Lesra for all the efforts he put for him and comments, "Hate put me in prison, love's gonna bust me out." Lesra replies that if love can't, he'll do it by himself. Back in court, Reuben finally considers innocent and released from prison. After 30 agonizing years. While 2/3 of his life has been gone. I appreciate your time and I hope you enjoyed it. Please give your opinion about the movie.